Hello, this is Straight from the Coffin with two goths and a coffin.
Yes.
And I am Amari.
And I'm Jude.
And today we are going to continue our conversations from our past couple of episodes.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't listened to those, we have been talking about gender, race, and sexuality, all those intersections as it pertains to the TV show Interview with the Vampire. If you didn't already know about, didn't know that, I'm surprised that you're listening, but
Yeah, this is a wild place to jump in. But also, we're specifically talking about it in relation to the characters Louis, Claudia, and Armand.
Yes.
So we did our Louis episode. You should go and listen to that one.
Yes.
And then we did our Claudia episode, and you should listen to that one as well.
Yes.
Because now we're on Armand.
Yes. So you're behind, but that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool too. You can also listen to this first and then listen to those. But
yeah, we will probably refer back to we said this in our previous ones,
mm-hmm.
but
yeah.
So because all of these characters obviously interact with each other, and these intersections color the way that they interact with each other.
Exactly.
So.
My cat's very cute, y'all.
Yeah.
Did you know that it was my cat's birthday last week?
Oh.
No, you didn't know that.
Happy birthday to
Happy
Eponine.
birthday to Eponine, my daughter. She's the best. She's the cutest cat in the world. So wish her happy birthday. Send her some treats or something.
Yeah, let's see how many times she sabotages this
recording. She's
recording.
already thinking about it. She's already sniffing around. Yep, there she goes. There she goes. Knocking over a skull.
Okay.
Fake skull, by the way.
Okay.
But yeah, so we are talking about Armand today. And we have a order that we're going to do. We're going to start by...
We have a loose order because I feel like with the others we had more clear delineations of we want to talk about this first and then this. With our Louis one, we're let's talk about New Orleans and then get into Paris and Dubai. Yeah. And then with Claudia, we're season 1, season 2. Yeah. But Armand is so nebulous.
And also, we have to do it this way because we have only seen so much of Armand's backstory at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, what the main pieces that we have seen have influenced the way that he treats Louis and Claudia specifically.
Yeah.
So we're mainly going to get into that. We're going to start by giving a little background based off what we've seen in the show.
Mm-hmm.
We may talk a little bit about
Here's
things.
The thing. I have read the book The Vampire Armand.
I have not, though.
And I have also read the book. I've read The Vampire Lestat, Queen the Damned, The Vampire Armand.
Yeah.
Which means I know a lot of his backstory.
Yes.
But I don't want to talk about the books so much because we haven't seen that stuff, even though I can draw parallels to what they're doing in the show to stuff that's happened in the books.
Mm-hmm.
But since we haven't seen their full adaptation of his backstory yet, I don't want to definitively get into the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
But I am also very tempted to get into the nitty gritty. So
Amari
is here to spray me with a spray bottle
basically.
if I say in the books. I would say more than 3 times perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah. So we might pull a little bit from it. Well, Jude might pull a little bit from it, if it's relevant.
Yeah.
But we won't go too deeply into it, just to kind of respect the journey of those who have not read the books.
Mm-hmm.
But also again, like Jude just said, we don't know how much they really will put in.
Yeah. Because they've edited or not edited, but they've put their own spin on some of the backstories we've seen so far.
Yeah.
There's also, of course, natural changes because show Armand is older than book Armand, so there's naturally going to be biographical differences there.
Yeah.
His race is different, where he's from is different.
Yeah.
There's certain things they've already hinted that couldn't have happened. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's basically it. So we're going to get into his background a little bit. talk about what we do know,
Mm-hmm.
and then take those things and talk about how they have had impact in the way he's treated Louis and in the way he's treated Claudia. And then last, we're also going to touch back in on his relationships with like other folks as well.
Yeah. We're also going to sprinkle in here and there how the fandom talks
we are
about
definitely
him.
going to talk about the
just because it's very icky.
Yeah. Some of y'all aren't shit. I'm not going to lie. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it.
Yeah. It's a little...
It's getting weird.
It's getting weird.
But yeah, so, like, let's get into it. What do we know about Armand, Jude?
Oh my god. Okay.
But keep it
I know I
condensed.
will be. Oh god. So, we get that... I was going to say nice, but it's like we get that, like, good biography he gives himself.
Right.
Of himself in the museum scene. So, the things we know about him.
Yeah, let's get into it.
He was sold into slavery by his parents. I need you to know that in our Google Doc where we took notes, I put a frowny face next to that.
Yeah.
Because that's very upsetting.
It is very upsetting.
But also not super uncommon for that time period. This is a pre-chattel slavery world and culture.
So it looks a little different.
It looks a little different. People sold each other into slavery for a lot of reasons. When I was doing research, I learned about a woman who sold her sister into slavery to pay off her own slavery debt that she had.
Crazy.
Yeah, that was a crazy story.
Boxing
immediately. But yeah, so like that was, you know, if we assume that Armand's family was maybe poverty-stricken, it would not be out of place for them to sell one of their children to slavery. One of the parents could also have sold themselves into slavery, then that would not have been uncommon.
Yeah.
We know that somehow he got sent to Venice, which is also, it was kind of the slavery capital of the Mediterranean, and the Mediterranean was kind of the slavery capital of the world at the time. Yeah, very bad. In fact, a lot of the ways in which, like, when I was looking into research on this as well, because I was trying to see specifically how slavery in Venice, what the, like, conventions were for that particular thing, because my knowledge of historical slavery is Roman Empire and then American chattel slavery.
Yeah, that's...
And there's some difference.
Yeah, that's
there's a journey
like...
here. But actually, they used some of the models for from Venetian slavery in settling in the Americas and setting up that situation. So there's a direct thread to be tied between that mode of slavery and the slavery that then began the evolution of slavery in the American South. Yeah. So those things are related.
But you did a lot of good research.
I cracked open JSTOR and I was doing research.
I need y'all to know that Armand is Drew's special. So, like,
if you can't
I'm gonna be real.
Shout out to the person on the Reddit who called me an Armand stan.
Oh yeah,
that's crazy. They called me an Armand stan, and I was like,
listen, okay, Drew's not an annoying Armand stan. Just like they also enjoy Lestat.
I do enjoy Lestat, but the thing is, like, I enjoy the things that they do that are bad are I would not find these characters as interesting if they were good people, or if they were, like, completely only victims to the winds of fate. Like, they do fucked up shit. But I like to go and tie into the threads of, like, ooh, it's so interesting how they're recreating this bit of their trauma, or, like, how these actions are informed by this backstory. It makes it messier.
Like they aren't doing fucked up shit.
Why the fuck would I like Armand if I didn't want to talk about the fucked up shit he does? That'd be such a boring guy.
Yeah.
So we have that. I also would like to use my first free space for
Here we go.
talking about the books briefly.
Yeah.
Because we learned that he was sold to a brothel and then was bought by a vampire named Marius de Romanus. For those who don't know, and I don't remember if they said this in the show yet.
What piece?
Like how old Marius is or where he's from.
I don't feel like
I don't think they
have.
did.
I
think they've just only said he's a
remember.
contemporary of Tintoretto's when it comes to the
Yeah.
paintings and that he bought him.
Yeah, I think that's all we really know about him so
Okay,
far.
but so his name is a hint. His name literally means Marius the Roman. He's from ancient Rome. If you couldn't tell from his name. Spoiler. His name is a spoiler. But yeah, so there was also a thing when I was reading up on certain modes of Venetian slavery, young Muslim boys, I know you couldn't sell Muslim people into slavery, or Muslims couldn't sell Muslims into slavery, but they would somehow still end up in slavery somehow. That just happened. Either they would lie, which is one theory I've seen for why his name may have been Arun, because that's a Hindu name, or people would just do it anyway on the sly, because it was considered a status symbol to have a quote-unquote Ottoman slave. Specifically a young boy. That was a status symbol to have in your household. And one of the things that they would do is give them this education and kind of show that, like, impart a Western European education on these boys and show how sophisticated they could be, as opposed to the ideas that were typically held. It was also sub-Saharan African boys were also considered the status symbol for the same reason. So
y'all can't see my face right now.
Yeah, he's making a face because it's ghoulish.
It really is.
It's really vile.
And I'm like, the way that society has continued with that. Anyways,
so Armand, when he was in Marius's household, did get a really good education, because it would have looked so good on Marius to have this boy who is so smart and well-spoken. But also, on Marius's part, we learn in the book Blood and Gold, which is the Marius book, which I don't recommend anyone reads, but there are interesting tidbits if you want to learn about Armand.
Oh, can I just say something real quick? Just for anyone listening, that this is not
an endorsement.
No. That this household right here is a fuck Marius household. Just very clear.
Oh yeah. I want to be so clear that like, it's fuck Marius. Every day I wake up, I say fuck Marius. Every night I go to bed, I say fuck Marius.
Yeah, for those few weirdo book fans who, for some reason, feel like people are just trying to, like, I don't know, act like he's worse somehow than he is. No, because he is.
He's really bad.
He's evil, and he, like, it's literally fuck him every single fucking day.
Yeah.
So let's be very clear about that. I just as you were saying it, I was just thinking about all the things that we've talked about in the past of how people.
Oh yeah.
Very recently tried to just, like.
Oh, it's not recent, but yes.
What?
People trying to be like Marius isn't that bad?
Yeah, I mean,
that's been since.
Oh yeah, I know, but I mean, like, recently we've
talked about
literally
the other day.
The other day, yeah, like it happens so often.
But yeah, so sorry, of course, anything I said I think wasn't gonna make Marius look good.
Oh yeah, no. But I was just making sure. I was like, before anyone gets too far into it.
Oh yeah.
If you want to stop here because you, for some reason, think that this is gonna be
I'm gonna say anything good about him.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen here.
That's not gonna happen. But yeah, so we learn in the book Blood and Gold, that Marius kind of wanted a blank slate to influence, and I'm gonna use the word groom, and we're gonna have all the entendres that come across with that, but groom him into the perfect vampire, but also kept giving him tests and telling him he failed no matter what, even though he kind of knew always he was going to turn Armand, but still made Armand feel like he was failing. So anyway, but that thing that he was doing of being like, I want this blank slate, I think is a perfect historical parallel to what these, like, slave owners would do when they purchased these young boys, purposefully, boys, to kind of overwrite their quote-unquote, like, less sophisticated worldviews and less sophisticated cultures, and in like a intellect, quote unquote, to impart this specific Western European mindset and worldview and education.
God, I'm just like literally talk about the threads from that era of slavery and then moving up to chattel slavery and just still seeing those
we're saving
threads,
them from these
both with
barbaric
like black
cultures,
folk and then like how we see indigenous children were like
res schools and like all of these like forced imparting of Western European like culture
be like, well, we're
as better.
Saving them, we're like, no, you're fucking not.
Yes, and that's why we see in the show, I think we can feel that because we hear Armand refer to Marius's worshipful mercy towards him. I think there's some people who I've seen who are they're being too hard on Marius because Armand is being a lot harsher to him on the show than in the book. But I think him saying that, like, I basked in his mercy, his worshipful mercy, also shows that he has he's trying not to portray Marius as like an all bad person because I think he has really complicated feelings on him.
Yeah.
Because what happened before and what happened after with Armand was so bleak. He was in a brothel when he was a child to the age of 15. And then he gets into the Children of Darkness, which is the next thing that happens to him. So there's this one point in time where he had a roof over his head, clothes on his back, food in his stomach, and education. It also just so happens that he is a child sex slave. Yeah. But he rationalizes that in a really hard, like, severe way of, like, but it was, like, he's like, but it was not that bad. Even the way I think he talks about his, Mary's trafficking him, essentially, just continuing that trafficking that he was experiencing, but in a more, quote-unquote, sophisticated setting. He's not, in a brothel being handed out to anyone who pays. He's being quote-unquote donated to talented painters who then portray him, but also we see the painting he's very whitewashed.
Oh my god.
So it's like that, I think, also the implications kind of yes, there's like this implications of how Marius sees him. I think even without us knowing this background from Blood and Gold, because of the painting and because of what Armand says in that scene, we know two things about Marius. One, he sees Armand as a tradable commodity. And two, he sees his ethnic features as a flaw that can be rendered out by a good enough artist.
Oh, God.
So, I think, and that also, I think the physically whitewashing him, I think is also metaphorical for the imparting that Western European worldview onto him.
Yes.
Because also Armand doesn't really remember his home. We know that he barely remembers what his name was. Like, he's really foggy on it. When he's in episode 5, when he's talking about his first memory is being run down by slavers, but that must have been when he was at least 10.
Yeah.
Which means the first 10 years of his life are gone. Remember. So, it is that, like, literally overriding him, putting a more whitewashed version of him out into the world. I think we had a conversation about it, that I see Armand as kind of like a transracial adoptee, with like parents who really don't want to engage with their child's like heritage and culture. So he's so divorced from his culture.
Yeah.
He like, I don't think, I think as opposed to like Louis and Claudia, who have this community that they came from, that then they were disconnected from, Armand, I think if you were to ask him where he's from, he wouldn't know how to answer you. I think he intellectually knows that he's a man of color, but I don't know that he identifies with that experience because he is so disconnected from his culture. Even though he's very clearly not white, but he has no background with being from Delhi, with being, from the Delhi Sultanate.
And as you said, like, it doesn't even exist as
it
was anymore. So, like, he can't even, like, go back and be, like...
He can go back, but it's so different.
Yeah. And, like, we've talked about before, he goes from, like, one, like, white, very white, structured environment to the cult, which is another.
Yes, his like forced indoctrinate, because like also Marius being a Roman, he's not Christian.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there were Roman Christians, but like that's not what
but...
Marius was. So he then goes from that to basically being indoctrinated into a Catholic cult and being a forced conversion to Catholicism, essentially, and the violence of that. And we don't see the violence of what the Children of Darkness did, so I don't really want to get into that, because as opposed to the Marius stuff where we have hints already, there are no hints other than it is a cult, and cult brainwashing is inherently violent.
Yes.
And we see the violence that he enacted as cult leader, so we can infer the violence that he witnessed as cult member before he was promoted. But
it's still,
at the very
it is like, it is Catholic, so it's like it's still a very like white structured like environment that he's once again in.
Yes. Yes.
That continued detachment from any kind of actual like connection to his own culture just persists.
Yeah, so like, he spends 240 years in this Catholic cult in France. In addition to all the mortal years he spent in Venice as a as a human. And then he spends another 150 years in Paris doing the theater thing. He's just not, he doesn't have a community. He's not even like I wouldn't say close to the Coven members in that way. I don't think they see him as like a friend. They can't see him as a friend.
Yeah.
Otherwise it would crumble. He is Metra. He is the Coven leader. He is the artistic director.
Yeah.
Like, he is very much, he's embodied this hierarchy and enacts it very stringently. And I wrote, because I was talking about that fact that he's like disconnected from his culture that we do see in Dubai.
Oh yeah, I was just about to bring that up. That it is nice to see like he then tries to like reconnect.
Yeah.
In Dubai. I do think that it is interesting that once he's stripped from these other influences, this prison of these like white structures, finally that's when he gets to like try to reconnect.
But I also find it interesting that he chooses to do it in Dubai specifically is where we see it, because Dubai doesn't have history.
That was also a good point.
When he says like when he's Rashid Mond, fake Rashid, a facade, and Dan was just like, oh, I thought you were a Dubai native, and he responds with, Dubai is a child, nobody's a native. And this is where he's doing in this like fucking theme park of a city that's like so artificial and also built on slavery. Similarly, a port city like Venice and also New Orleans that's built on this slavery, specifically of Africans and South Asian people.
Exactly.
That he's there trying to reconnect with Islam. But yeah, it's like this person with no roots in a city with no history trying to piece together what he doesn't have anymore.
Yeah.
And there was an interview I had seen where they were talking about how like Armand kind of represents like Anne Rice's own struggles with religion. Because I jokingly call her the only 2-time ex-Catholic, because she was raised Catholic, left the church, became very religious and crazy, and then left again. But I do find it very interesting that like I need to double check this, and I'll like, I don't know, put something in if I'm wrong.
Okay.
But I'm pretty sure she left because she wrote Memnoch, which was also like we're getting into religion and how God and the devil and heaven and hell and how that should look and what that means.
I haven't read that one either.
I'm not going to. I have no interest in it.
A couple of the Vampire Chronicle books.
I have literally no interest, but I've seen enough like excerpts to know that it's literally Lestat being visited by the devil, and I've seen the conversation about what hell should look like. Can hell be a place of rehabilitation for evil people to eventually get to heaven?
Okay.
And Lestat's like, no. He's like, no, I don't think you can be rehabilitated. I think you just go to hell. Anyway, so that's the book, and then at the end of that book, spoilers, Armand attempts suicide, and then the vampire Armand starts right after that, which is very much about like Armand's history with being religious and being into religion, leaving religion, coming back to religion, having this religious psychosis. Like, he just has really complicated views on God. And I think in the show, having that extra layer of him potentially being raised Muslim, being put into this very atheist home, in this like Western European structure, having that eradicated, then being indoctrinated into a Catholicism, and then being put back into a new, like, we're libertine, age of enlightenment, we don't believe in God anymore, how gauche. And then trying to figure out where he fits into all of this, because I do think Armand wants something to worship. He typically tries to make it a person, but then we also see him in Dubai trying to pray to God, but also like, what does a vampire pray for? Should have, like, what would that look like? But yeah, I just find all this really interesting for him, and I think the key for me with all of this is like, he is a person who is very unmoored. Like, yeah.
I just had an interesting thought. It's getting a little off a little bit.
Go for it.
It's a little off, but just like you saying that, he's brought into like this atheist, like other atheist white structure, and how often I see, like white queer atheists. Because like I also am not, like, I don't really believe in God myself, but I do recognize the importance for like some people of color, and how white queer folks will try to like act like they are more like just that we're enlightened than black queer folks or like brown queer folks for like still like believing in those beliefs, and like how violent it feels for them to how they talk. And I don't know, that just like just reminds me of that, because like there can be a lot of violence for like queer people of color within like the religions that they are in, but then the way that white queer folk will talk over them or speak over them and try to act like they should just not have any sort of beliefs or whatnot is like 10 times more violent. I'm just like, it's just so interesting, because marriage tries to posture himself in such a way, and I'm like, I don't know, it just reminds me of
Marius
that.
and Lestat both posture themselves as being more enlightened for not having faith. And I think it's really interesting that with Marius, the person that he's posturing and doing all this for, like, towards is Armand, and then with Lestat it's Louis, who Louis does have very strong roots and does have a very strong connection to Catholicism and the church, and what that means for the community that he grew up in, to be a part and have such a strong tie to the church. And then I find it interesting for Armand as well, because like, while anyone can convert to Islam, it is kind of it is, I don't want to say it's racialized, but it has a very strong history with having a specific worship base. So when you say like someone's Muslim, we do tend to think of also ethnicity as opposed to Christianity or Catholicism. So there is that extra like racialized like, I don't want to say, I guess, aggression toward him for being like, oh, you can't, oh, that's,
no,
for...
it is. It's weird. Oh.
The world's loudest plane.
I do have the window open.
Oh. It's like, so it does feel very racialized for, like, I would say either Marius or the Coven, like, the Children of Darkness, to be like, you can't believe in that. And then just very interesting to see Armand try to get back into it.
I really hope we get to see more of that.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to see more of it already and see what that looks like.
But I'm like, we're definitely going to see more of it later, because like season 2, I think, is just the beginning of Armand's story.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So we're definitely gonna see more of it as we go on, and like that.
Which is why we're even structuring today's podcast.
Yeah, is that we're gonna see a lot more of this later on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think all of this, like, being removed from community, having such a tenuous view of himself, racially, ethnically, does then color how he goes into his relationships with Louis and Claudia, as we already said earlier. I think let's start. Do you want to start with Louis?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Louis and Armand.
Louis and Armand, baby. Oh my gosh, like we said.
Where do we even start with that?
I think to start, I do think that this is probably the most significant relationship he's probably had with a man of color.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So how that looks for him and how that would potentially be healing for him.
It should be, but...
And I do think part of him, I think we can see, we can consider him actually practicing Islam in Dubai as evidence of that healing.
Yeah, that's why I was like, it's interesting
that he's comfortable enough to do it there without feeling like Louis is going to sneer at him.
Yeah.
The person doing the sneering is the reporter he's waiting on to leave.
The white.
Yeah.
White. Reporter.
But yeah. Especially with him trying to like quiz Armand.
I know.
Lady's like, and he's just
mind
like,
your fucking business.
You think he doesn't know, considering the fact that his name's Rashid, which is one of the names for Allah. Anyway, but yeah, so,
don't get me started.
But I do think in Paris, he has not broken that brainwashing yet.
Yeah.
He is still ingratiating himself to white supremacist structures.
Yep. And it's very evident as we go along.
Yes, and I think that absolutely colors how he interacts with Louis. That control, the control he wants to have over him of like trying to get him to join the coven, but also like, I think being a little excited that he's not a part of the coven.
Yeah, which is why I think he
could have made Louis do it if he wanted to, but he didn't, because I think part of him was excited by it.
Yeah, for sure.
And then
he's a little pouty about it, but
but he's pouty about everything.
Rolls my eyes.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that Assad interview where he's like, even though his Armand is older, he says he still acts like a teenager. I think he kind of has some arrested development.
Yeah.
Because of that. Oh, because one of the things I want to get into a little bit is like, because of his status in Venice as an enslaved person, and specifically as a South Asian man, the infantilization he would have faced. Like, I don't think Marius ever would have treated him like an adult man.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you, for like 12 years, your entire formative years as a human being, you're treated like a child? I think you do have an immaturity about you kind of for the rest of your life. I mean, unless you like actively break out of it, but when has he had the opportunity? Because
he goes straight into cult next.
Yeah, which is very paternalistic cults. And so it's like, where does he fall with that? And so we do see him be very pouty and a little bratty about not getting his way in a very immature like manner.
Sorry, he just takes me out.
Yeah, I'm thinking of him on the bed when like Louis is just like when he's just like, frowny face and furrowed brow.
We're just chilling, damn.
Yeah. And he's just like, but I keep your secret.
Okay.
And Louis like, well, weird. Do you want me to come around more? And he's like, yeah. He's being very pouty because he does have that arrested development, I believe. I feel.
But then like that poutiness comes with like violence because
he's a hyper powered vampire with a lot of power, like both like actual power and also structural power.
Yeah.
He is the Coven leader.
Yeah.
So it's like, but he always like shies away from and fully admitting it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. Even when him and Louis were in the tunnel, he's like, why is it with
those most power often the weakest?
Yeah. I'm like,
but I think because he didn't want to.
He didn't want to. Oh yeah.
Well, I was like, he didn't want to. He didn't force Louis to join the Coven, and because he didn't do that, that has him in an awkward spot with the rest of the Coven, and so they're the ones who are like, you gotta kill this guy, Armand. Yeah, you would have already killed him if he was anyone else. And Armand's like,
I don't want to. I like him.
He's like, but then he doesn't do it. He can't do it. And I think that's what makes Louis think that he has more power over Armand than he actually does. Because Louis like, hell yeah. This guy could have killed me. He defied his whole coven for me. And that's when Louis, I think, starts feeling his oats a little bit. Starts being like, oh, as opposed to Lestat, who, when he had the opportunity for violence, did do violence. Armand has the opportunity for violence and would be justified, but he's not doing that because he's either more disciplined or he cares for me too much or he's more loyal. And since we know that Louis was looking for something different from his relationship with Lestat, which is kind of why he wasn't really committing to Armand, because he was like, I'm putting out my feelers trying to figure out what you're doing.
Some kind of sense of security, someone he's gonna actually like feel safe with, and
I think in that moment he felt like Armand was listening to him because like he pleads his case in the tunnel, and Armand's like, okay, and takes him home. Yeah. We also know that Armand probably had to fly him up to the manhole because we see him float up. So I'm like, him trusting Armand to do that when we know his trauma with being carried like that.
I never even thought about that.
Yeah. And the fact that Armand didn't hurt him, Armand didn't drop him, Armand took him home, and then looked like he was ready to just go back in the manhole and walk home. Yeah. Willing to just be like, well, that's how it shook out, I guess. Yeah. But Louis like, wow.
Oh, okay.
This guy's different. Dun, dun. He's different, but not in a good way. Yeah. He's a different kind of bad.
What is it? Two sides of the same coin or whatever. Yeah. Unfortunately.
But yeah, I feel a lot of people do interpret that scene in a way that doesn't make any sense to me. Because if Louis was genuinely afraid of Armand, why would he not commit to him? Because if he knew that Armand wanted commitment and he was afraid of him, he'd be like, oh, yes, of course we're together. Yeah. And then he wouldn't have said, no, we're not a couple in front of the coven, because that's embarrassing to Armand.
Yes.
He wouldn't have felt like he had the right to do that. Yeah. Or like he wouldn't have felt safe enough to do that.
Yeah, I do think that's really interesting and something that to keep in mind, because I do also see a lot of people talk like that, but I really truly think that Louis felt a sense of security with Armand that he did not feel with with Lestat at that point. Yeah. Like he actually felt that why the power difference was, the real true power difference was like greater, but they were on the same page.
Yeah. And I think part of that does come from Armand being a man of color, that he's like, because that's something that's pointed out by Claudia when she's just like, oh, they're being led by a man with skin darker than yours. So it's kind of like them both assuming solidarity.
Yes.
Which was not a good choice. Not necessarily the right choice with this particular guy. But yeah,
I understand. Assuming that,
because you see this guy, they've seen vampires in power, and none of them have been people of color. They've all been white people. Yeah. So to see this guy who's so in control, who's so he's got a vibe to him. And they're like, wow. And all these people listen to him. No, they don't. But all these people, like, he runs the coven. And it's like, But I think Armand, one of the ways that he shirks responsibility for his actions is by underselling how much power he has.
Yeah.
And specifically, like, him being like, oh, like, waiting for them to tell him he has to do something.
Yeah.
So now he doesn't have a choice.
Yeah.
Quote unquote.
Yeah.
And we see him sell that, like, with the, not to get too into the trial, but, like, with the trial when he's like, oh, well, they made me be there. They made me
do it.
Yeah, when it's like, you could have done something.
I thought you were the strongest fucking...
Yeah, but you had the vampire Sam with the fucking prop scythe, and apparently that was enough to keep you in the seat.
Ooh, I can't.
Yeah.
Get out of my face with that. But
yeah.
But
yeah, and then when we talk about that sort of, like, shirking responsibility, I think that also plays into Dubai, where he sets up situations to make Louis look bad.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, in episode 1, when he sees that Louis starting to remember stuff, when he needs Louis to have as foggy a memory as possible, so that when Louis asks him a question, he can say an answer and Louis be like, yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But when Louis is starting to remember things, and he's just like, what if we took a break? And Louis is like, no, I'm good. And he's like, I guess I'm leaving. And so he steps out, but then, they have the conversation that night where he's like, oh, we can get Daniel back on the page that he was on back in San Francisco. We just have to do it as a team.
Yes.
And Louis is like, okay. And then they show up. They start harassing that old man, which they should have. Congrats. That was one of my favorite moments.
That was also one of my... Listen, that was such a good time. I wish I would have
They should have done more. It was so funny. But yeah, like, him encouraging and egging Louis on to do shit like that. And then being like, trying to throw a softball afterwards when he's just like, oh, she wanted to say yes, but you hadn't given her a reason to trust her. And then the next episode, him being like, I'm so sorry that Louis did that. When he set up the situation. And they even hint at that being the case when in that moment when Louis and Armand are doing that, we see the clip from episode 5. Of, like, that's when we first see the flash to the 70s when they're doing that, of Armand doing exactly what Louis is doing, but back then, but somehow it's Louis going too far here, and him having to play damage control with that, and then being like, let me throw you a bone by giving him the background on how the Teatro de Vampiros was formed.
Once again, unfortunately, Armand leaning to some anti-blackness
as
well. Like,
in order to
painting
look
him as more, aggressive than he's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry.
In order to ingratiate himself to a white person.
Exactly.
So, like, there is that
it's
ingratiating
like
to white structures.
Comes back into play.
He's like, how can I manipulate this situation in order for me to look better?
Yeah.
So yeah, him doing that. I think also the fact that he didn't stand up to Santiago when Santiago was being racist and doing the voice.
Exactly.
When he's just made it seem like both of you were being immature right now.
Like, hello? What was this? How did this get started?
Yeah.
Because you didn't say shit.
Yeah.
Come get
because
your
Armand could have shut that down way sooner, but he didn't.
He chose not to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's also around the time when he's punishing Claudia for her not wanting to do the play anymore, even though she tried to concede from the play in the most respectful way possible. When she could have been like, this shit sucks, fuck you. She's like, respectfully, Metra, I would prefer not to have to do this
like,
play
honestly,
because of how it
been
hurts
like,
me.
Actually, fuck off. I'm not fucking doing this. She would have been fully in her right.
Yeah.
Because that fucking play was fucked up. So fucked up. So fucked up. Anti-black as fuck. Disrespectful of, like, everything that both Louis and Claudia have gone through, because they were taking pieces of, like, everything. It was just,
it's really fucked up, and it's part of Armand trying to break her because he's already decided that she's not gonna make it.
Yeah.
I think whatever hang-ups he has, I mean, like, of course, technically her being made was illegal, but they can't punish the guy who did it because they assume he's dead.
They weren't going to anyways, because he came back and they're still like, he's gonna be part of the trial instead.
They're like, well, you did murder him. It's like, well, no, I didn't. If he's on trial, if he's able to,
he's right here.
If he's able to be a witness on his own murder, then I don't think I did a good job.
Exactly.
But so he's already assumed and written her off, and then he puts her in this thing. I think also to break her and make her compliant, like to make her like. Because her spirit is strong. Mm-hmm. Like, she's so strong. And Louis says that to him in the tunnel. And...
God, that scene made me
so rough.
The way that Louis is just, like, basically begging for her life.
Yeah.
And he's already conceded. He's like, cool, I guess, you're gonna kill me, but just,
it's like, if I die, I die, but please tell her she's beautiful every...
Like, that hurt me so... Oh, please, God. Oh, my God. I love my little family, but okay.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. And, like, him trying to break her, in a, very cult-like way, I think...
Once again, leaning into those white structures.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about it in the Claudia episode, but, like, it is so blatant how, with Claudia, we see that cult violence that Armand suffered, presumably.
Yes.
Coming up again here. Repeating those cycles. And I think being harder on her because of her race.
Mm-hmm. Because that was another thing that we talked about before, that it's really interesting that he doesn't, all the other people in the coven, they have been acting out, but who does he come down on? He comes down on Louis, he comes down on Claudia the hardest, and it's just like, so why are you not treating them the same way?
Yeah, because we see him in that exact
young black girl.
Yeah, because we see him in that exact same episode, like getting that laundry list of how everyone's acting out.
Yeah, and
he's just like, ugh. But then Claudia is just like, she gives a lackluster performance, and he's just like, how could you have done this?
Yeah, how could you disrespect me like this?
What is it? Lackluster, bromidic, unacceptable.
First of all, shut the fuck up. Just shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And yeah, we really see it play out, but also I think Armand is patting himself on the back a little bit because he's like, well, I'm not being as hard on her as they were on me. But that's something since we don't have any hints to, I don't want to get super into.
Yeah.
Just know the breaking of him in the book was very, 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 very rough. Mm-hmm. And I think part of it, like, is his, like, I don't say indignation, but, like, how dare you not break when I did?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So it's like he has to break her because if he doesn't, then he sees himself as weak.
Yeah.
Then he 100%. Just couldn't make it, but this person can. I think maybe even if we want to think about it, it's like he had better blood. He had Marius's blood in him. He was a lot stronger. Mm-hmm. But somehow this fledgling who's never going to be able to, who's too weak to even make other vampires, who's this, like, stuck in as a child in a lot of different ways, both vampirically and physically, isn't breaking, and I did, like when I broke, you know? So he has to punish her harder
for the black audacity. That's what they always try to say, like, you know. Yeah. The same with Santiago, really. We'll get Santiago. Yeah. The audacity to, like, just be black and, you know, do your thing, and they don't like to see it. No. They don't like to see it.
No, and then I think also if we want to start moving into the, because, like, you know, he does perpetuate anti-blackness, but we've also talked about how he experiences racism. Yeah. He experienced racism in his backstory, but also we see it in the story as it happens.
Yes, exactly.
And, like, Santiago, you can tell, has an entitlement to him and is resentful at having to answer to this Indian man. Yeah. I think it's very important that they made him British. Yes. That Santiago, because, like, they did such a clear, literally screamed at us that he used to be Iago. And Iago in the play Othello is, of course, a white man who is trying to convince a Moor to kill his lover. Which is exactly what he then does later in the episode, where he's like, well, you have to kill Louis. And Armand doesn't do it. but then he's like really pushing him toward that to try and like cause his own demise.
Yeah.
And like to underhandedly take over his place.
Yeah.
And Armand talks about mutiny brewing, and Louis even knows when he's straight, is like, Santiago wants your job.
Yeah.
Because Santiago doesn't want to answer to Armand.
Yeah, I just want
he doesn't want to answer to him at all.
He's like, no.
And we can kind of see the entitlement when he puts that kiss on his lips.
Yeah.
In front of the audience, in front of Louis, kind of claiming him in this way.
Yeah. Which is also like there's also the sexual
undertone,
the sexual violence once again, that we see perpetrated. But yeah.
There's a lot of it is very interesting that when it comes to Armand, white men in this story seem to look at him and be like,
yes,
I should sexually degrade this man in some way.
We see it time and time again. And
the fact that Armand doesn't really do anything about it. I mean, of course he couldn't do anything about it in his backstory, but he could like punish Santiago for that, but he doesn't. He could have done something to Daniel when Daniel makes the rent boy comment, but he doesn't. He just has to leave the room.
Yeah.
It's just really
That's gross.
Yeah. And then, speaking of Daniel, the fact that Daniel does lash out with these racialized comments at Armand. We see, like, the rent boy comment, of course. The fact that when Armand is first talking to him, interestingly enough, in front of the Marius painting, when he's asking about it, he insinuates that he's like, so are you and Louis, ...
Once again, this jumping into this weird, like, sexual dynamic is making assumptions. I mean, are they together?
Was it true? Yes.
But that's not the point. Why are you assuming that right away that this young man who working for his boss
has to be sleeping with him? Yeah. Or that it has to have a sexual vibe to it, or that I think on both sides of it, Louis either taking sexual advantage of an employee, or the employee being open to his employer sexually. And I think that also plays with their races, the fact that Louis is black, the fact that Armand is Asian.
Exactly. That
he assumes that Louis would be pursuing an employee in this way, using that power dynamic, because he thinks this is a human man. So was it taking advantage of that power dynamic, and that this Asian man would be sexually open to being taken advantage of in that way. Yeah. That's just the nature of the thing.
Yeah. Like, it's a really weird assumption.
It's a very weird assumption. I don't see a lot
of people talk about that, to be honest.
Yeah. Just because it's true. But it's not true, not in the way that he imagines. Armand is way more powerful than Louis. Yeah. They've
been together forever.
They've been forever. That's his husband.
Not the same thing, but
yeah, he's like, that's my husband engaging in kinky role play. Yeah. Like, it's not what you think it is. But yeah, the fact that he immediately jumps to that, the fact that we get the rent boy comment.
Because we haven't seen, at that point, he hadn't seen anything that would have suggested.
The rent boy comment, we did see him sucking on his neck by that point.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm talking about
the first
one.
Okay.
Yeah.
When he said, when he does the first thing, we have not seen anything at all. We've just seen him be kind of too involved and being like, no third parties.
Yeah.
Before Louis is like, you can go.
Yeah.
But when he said the rent boy thing, where I saw him sucking on his neck and him, like, giggling and gasping and sighing, you know. But the guy had a little fun.
Yeah, should mind his fucking business.
Yeah. He's already seen him, like, drink from another guy.
Yeah.
Just have to assume that that's part of the job. If you're going to work for a vampire, they're going to drink your blood a little bit. Is he into it? Sure, but, like...
Who wouldn't be?
He
wished it was him, so back off. Mind your damn business.
Yeah.
You know.
And then we get, of course, in season 2, the Shah Rukh Khan comment.
I was just thinking of that one meme on TikTok when you're black, you're never really lonely. And it's always just like some white person in somebody's black business. And that's what I'm like, damn, needs to back the fuck up a little bit.
Yeah. But yeah, and then we get the Shah Rukh Khan comment, then just like the fact that he tries to explain.
Y'all think it's funny, by the way.
It's not funny.
It's a microaggression.
It's a macroaggression at this point.
Yeah.
Considering everything else.
Yeah. Just you know, but you know, we talked about it in the fandom, you know, one as well.
Yeah.
But you know, y'all don't listen.
But yeah. It's just, and the fact that like Daniel does that in order to kind of like we've also said this in the fandom one, but to reassert reassert his power, because he feels on the back foot. So the way he takes it out is by being racist, or by trying to put him in his place. Yeah, especially I think when he thought he was a servant, that's when he's making sexual comments to him.
Exactly.
And then when he finds out he's a vampire, he just starts making straight up racist comments to him, because I think now that he's like, well, you two are in a relationship and he's a really powerful vampire, maybe I shouldn't talk shit about your boyfriend in that way. To your face.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then also like undercutting his relationship with Louis, because like in that's the first episode of season 2, when Louis like, my love ran a theater company for many years, he goes, your love is in a box in New Orleans. So even saying that like whatever Louis feels for Armand is second rate to what he feels for Lestat, even though we know that he's been with Armand way longer.
Exactly. Which is another fandom.
Thing.
Which are we almost? I think we're almost at the fandom piece, aren't we?
I think so. Do you think we talked enough about Claudia? I think we did. With that we can without getting into the trial.
Yeah, because we were going to talk about the trial.
Oh yeah.
At length. Is there anything else before we move into talking about the fandom?
I do think. So I have it here. Something that I wrote down. We
have notes, y'all.
I need you to understand that we tried to write notes in person, and I was like, I don't know. And then at work, I wrote so much. And then I was like, can you see what happened when I went to this fugue state and just started typing about Armand?
I will say, it was more than I expected when I jumped into the doc. I was like, oh.
Yeah. But one of the things that I was talking about, I guess also related to like, I don't say necessarily how white people talk to him, but something I found really interesting that I think revealed Madeleine's privilege is when he, like, speaking of going back to him being like removed from community not really having community, I think a lot of people I see like them do like fucking own when they're having the conversation, and he's just like, what are you gonna do when the world around you is so different and you don't see yourself in the world anymore, when everything has moved so past that everything you grew up with is gone. And Madeleine's like, there's been a war. And I'm just like, and people are just like, yeah. But I'm like, no, for Armand, the amount of times he's stepped outside and the world has changed so drastically from the last time he was out in the world is jarring. The fact that he's from a place that doesn't exist anymore. I mean, like, Delhi exists, but not, he predates the country of India. Yeah. He's from the Delhi Sultanate. Like, the worldviews, the language, the clothes, the food, everything is different. If he were to go back, he would still be an outsider. Yeah, because 100%. Of how drastically the culture has shifted. If we even talk about his time in Europe, when he went underground with the Children of Darkness, it was the tail end of the Renaissance. So when he comes out, it's the Enlightenment. The way the world has changed. They're killing the monarchy in the streets. Yeah. Like, there's an upheaval of what, like, the government looks like and how people view monarchy. Democracy is coming out during this time. Like, all of the things he grew up with then in Venice is gone and is already being thrown on the pyre in the name of this new world that's emerging, and he has to relearn how to do that. So the fact that Madeleine thinks that because she went through World War II, that had enough of a world shift, a paradigm shift in Paris, that somehow it's unrecognizable, is fucking
it
laughable.
Might feel like that to you right now,
Yeah.
but it's definitely not to the same degree.
Yeah.
Even close.
Like, what are you gonna do in 400 years when they don't speak French in France anymore? Or the French that you grew up speaking is so archaic, no one can understand you.
Yeah.
Like, it's when the things that work, like, institutions of your country are gone.
Mm-hmm.
When Armand went under, the Eiffel Tower wasn't built. Actually, the Eiffel Tower wasn't built when Lestat left France. So something we equate so heavily with Paris wasn't there.
Yeah.
Like, so, and then things that would have been there, like from like Armand's world, are gone. So if Madeline leaves Paris, 300 years pass, she comes back, everything looks different.
Mm-hmm.
The way you would feel. The fact that nothing is there anymore. It's almost like you're trying to walk up a staircase and you're expecting an extra step, it's not there. That constant, like, drop in your stomach as the world is so drastically changed. But I think it has to do, like, it's such a privileged way of her looking at that situation. And the fact that she calls him young man, she really has no idea who it is she's talking to and the loss that he's felt. And I did see someone who kind of described Armand's experience as almost similar to, like, a survivor of genocide, especially because of what India went through at the hands of colonization and that slavery that hit, like, India. It's like, he is the remainer. He's the last survivor. So it's like, if he goes...
He's so disconnected.
He's so disconnected, but it's also like he is a hanger-on of a culture that's dead. Yeah. Or a culture, not dead, but like the world is gone.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
It's been decimated by time. And so it's like he does feel so lonely in this world. And it's just like, how are you going to feel when you are as lonely as I am? Because honestly, the fact that most of the other vampires do take long naps and Armand has never done that. He's never gone to sleep. He's been like...
Maybe he needs a nap. Maybe that's what he...
This is so annoying.
Maybe that's what he needs.
He needs a nap.
He needs to take a nap. He's been up for too long.
Yeah, he's gotta put him down. Like a toddler. Are you cranky? No, but I for some reason, and this is so annoying, but I kept thinking of, like, that line from Haunting of Hill House where it's like, no, like... was it like no living being can remain sane under the effects of like like pure reality or whatever it is, like sustained reality. And it's just like the fact that he has just like white knuckled his way through all of these centuries. It's like, you're crazy.
Yeah. It'll do something to you for sure.
Yeah, that's all I could like when I was like writing this. I was thinking about that in the back of my head of like no living thing can endure the effects of like something like what is it, like pure reality. So it's like ugh. If he makes up a couple of lies about his past in order to make it through, who can blame him? Yeah, like
And I do think it's interesting that it's Madeline as this white woman who is the one who says this to him.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely, like, part of it. Like, she
doesn't get it.
She doesn't get it. Like, she's been through tough shit, but, like, I don't want to be like, not the way that he has, but, like, multiply that by centuries. Like, it's just gonna keep happening. Also gonna say as like a little throw out that I had seen there, that was like part of him ingratiating himself to like these white supremacist structures, I think is very like emblematic, or like it's symbolic of when people of color, like non-black people of color, try to ingratiate themselves to these white supremacist structures to gain a quote-unquote benefit, but it's really negligible because, like, not to speak again too much about the trial when we want to get into a trial episode, but Armand throws Louis and Claudia under the bus to like keep onto the coven, but he gets thrown down so far down the ranks.
Exactly.
To, like, basically, like, being their servant.
Because they're not going to reward you.
No, absolutely not.
They never will.
No, and so, like, the quote-unquote benefit he got from doing that was negligible. It's simply he got to just still be in the coven, but not even as the leader anymore.
Is that really worth it?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah, so it's just, like, the fiction that participating in white supremacist structures as a non-white person will actually benefit you, because they just want to use you to enact violence, but the minute they can get you out, they're gonna do that.
Exactly.
Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into it even more in the trial episode. That will be our next episode, by the way.
Yes.
All of this is to build up to the trial episode where we're gonna talk about how this all
culminates.
Culminates. That's the word. I was like, that's not the right word. But yeah. So let's get into. We're gonna get into like the fandom now, and how the fandom talks about Armand. Because it's. It
is weird. I did want to start by a Tumblr post that I stole, because I think it outlines a lot of the issues that people have, like, or like the way that people treat him very well.
Okay.
And it's basically what they're saying is, like, the vampire, from the book and the show, whatever, the vampire Armand is an adult man, and the core of his story in the books is how, like, basically no one treats him as an adult man, and how that angers and, like, hurts him. And then because the show decided to make him a South Asian man, there's an extra layer of feminization and infantilization that comes with, like, Orientalism. So I think the fact that Armand has been aged up 10 years, but is still infantilized and feminized. Yeah, so, and then, to talk about another person, Lestat, the way we see Lestat interact with Armand. From
the very beginning,
we see him let his boyfriend call him a slur.
Yeah, that was
crazy.
That was crazy.
Yeah.
You know what else is crazy?
What?
Fans acting like that didn't happen.
Oh yeah, that certainly happened.
Yeah.
Nikki is many things. A bitch is one of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then also, like, the way he lets his boyfriend call him a slur. He also skirts around just calling Armand a slur by referring to him as a grub. I would say even Gremlin has an energy
especially
to it.
Especially coming from, like, white people at this point. Like,
I think they use it too much.
Yes. I was like, we were having fun at first, but the way that y'all...
Yeah.
It gets to a point.
I'm like, I think you want to say something else, but no, you can't get away with it.
Yeah.
And then also, while this is something that does happen in the books as well, and we do see some of it in the show, or at least the implication of it, Lestat kind of, like, quote-unquote, civilizing Armand and bringing him back into society has a really different vibe now that Armand is a man of color.
Yes.
The fact that he chooses his clothes. We see... I have to assume it's the same bow, because we see, like, Lestat show up at Armand's place with a little bow in his hair, and then we don't see him with a bow ever again. It's always in Armand's hair.
Yeah.
So the fact that he just, like, is like, here you go. Puts a little bow in his hair. And, like, is like, here's my little doll to dress up and, you know, take with me to the theater.
The connotation within the context of him now being a brown man is just...
It's different. Yeah. It's very different. And it has, like, an assimilation, like, vibe.
And it starts being very reminiscent of, you know, for me, I'm like, so we're repeating again.
Oh yeah, cycles.
Yeah, but we're repeating again, like, you know, the, like, that, just like that dynamic between him and Marius, of Marius trying to...
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know, westernize him.
To use my second card, my second
Yeah, go for it.
I do also think that, okay, so here's multiple things, okay?
Okay, go for it.
It's all one thing, but I'm gonna say a couple of things.
Mm-hmm.
One is, in the book, The Vampire Armand, we get very clear that Marius color-coded him and Armand. Marius always wears red. Armand always wears blue. He straight up says, like, Armand straight up says, he dressed me in blue, which he told me was my chosen color. And we see early in the interaction between Armand and Lestat. Lestat's in a red cloak.
Mm-hmm.
So there is very clear, at least from the books, there's a very clear, like, line being drawn between Marius and Lestat. The fact that Marius also went into the basement of the brothel and pulled him out.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that Lestat visits him in the basement, like, of the catacombs, and pulls him out.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that Armand himself ties these two experiences together is very clear. Also, in ancient Rome, blue was seen as a barbaric color. It was associated with barbarians. So the fact that Marius dressed himself in red and then told Armand that his color would be blue, I think has also a very clear tone. Even though Armand is white in the book, he's also... It's so interesting. I was talking to you about this, that Anne Rice invented new racism. She's like, I need more racism, but everyone's white. I'm gonna be racist against Eastern Europeans. Because the way they talk about Armand in the book is, she's like, very orientalized, like, the way they talk about him. With white Armand, Marius is still talking about his savage homeland, like, energy. So yes, it is weird. But yeah, so I think when you brought up that, oh, it's very reminiscent of what we can already assume happened with Armand and Marius, it's like, yes, and these connections are made very clear in the book. And I think the fact that they already purposefully put Lestat in that red cloak, I think is also in the show. The same connections are going to be tied together as well. So, and the fact that, like, it does bring him into that new but, like, libertine white supremacist, or, like, very white centric, at the very least, Eurocentric structure that is the theater. I also think it's very important that in the book, and in, like, if you saw the movie, Armand performs on stage, but in the show Armand does not perform on stage, because I don't think it would fly the same way if he came in being Gentleman Death. Like, it's so they give it to Santiago, but I don't think it would be seen as, like, quite as romantic, quote unquote. I did little quotes with my fingers and I realized this is not a visual medium. Like, if it's Armand doing it, but then we see Armand do it in episode 5 and he's better.
So also, because I was feeling crazy, I was like, I'm gonna be so for real. I just had Jude pause our recording, because I was like, was there ever any people of color on this stage aside from Claudia when they were, like, humiliating her?
The younger femme is on stage, but his father is the projectionist, and then Basilique is in the band, so we don't see him.
Yeah.
So there's really the only one guy, and we do see him the play isn't real, but when they do the Enduring for Guido, he's the other guy.
Okay.
But that was a play that was never really intended that they were actually gonna perform. Yeah. So it's like, we'll just throw it away, because it's like... So,
like, they're always, like, in the background aside from when they went to humiliate the people of color.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Once again, the Coffin is another white structure.
Yeah.
Harmful and very violent.
Yes.
That was crazy.
Yeah.
So I was there just like, wait a minute.
Oh, wait, that reminds me of another thing I had written down a bunch of notes that are in a weird order. And then also, like, on that same note of, like, the people of color in the Coven either being completely off stage so they're not seen, or being in the background. Like, the one time we do see, I don't remember. To me, in my brain, there one person, which is Tuan and Quang Pham. I don't remember which one's the father and which one's the son, because they're a unit to me. They're father and son.
They're father and son.
But the son,
yeah.
The whole time we see him, he's painted to look like a bumblebee.
Yeah.
Like it's just we don't ever see him in like a leading role, except for like we said, like Enduring for Guido. But that was like we said, a play that was never intended to be like actually performed. And I think, like we were saying, like Armand is perpetrating this white supremacist structures that he's been placed into, and I think, you know, considering the fact that his two primary abusers were white people, you know, with Marius or in the coven, so or the cult.
Feeding into that and repeating those same type of...
Yes. Cycles. Like, a lot of his abusive actions are going to be racist. And I think, like, also because his two primary abusers were white people and that abuse was racist, he's internalized a lot of that himself. Yes. About himself. And so we kind of see the crazy
yeah, because, you know, a lot of times when other people of color are racist, there's a lot of that internalized racism that they're in turn...
A lot of self-hatred.
Yeah, spitting back out.
Yes. And, like, with that, like... in Venice, he would have never really been seen as, like, quote-unquote, a man. There were, like, stereotypes about South Asian men, and slaves in general. Like, enslaved people, like, weren't men the way that white Europeans were men. And so the fact that that there is that frustration for him at, like, not being seen as a man, but also, like, the fact that he's been treated as not a man for so long, I think he internalizes, like, he's that infantilization. And so the fact, the crazy detail when Claudia's like, how's my coffin? The fact that when he moved in, he's sleeping in Claudia's coffin.
Kind of crazy.
Is crazy. The fact that he puts himself in the child space.
Yeah.
Why could he not have shared Louis' coffin?
Right, like, that's like...
he's like in, like, crawling up, like, pulling up his knees to fit into Claudia's coffin every night. Like, that is crazy. And then, like, with that same, like, violence he faced, like, we know from the Lumond fight when Louis says my daddy vampire. So, like, we know that Armand, when he's talked about Marius, has talked about him as a father.
Yeah.
Enough so that when Louis refers to Marius, he only calls him, in that fight, Armand's daddy. Because when he's, like, there, or when he's talking about how the coven killed him, he goes, and the vampires who killed my daddy. So there is an incestuous nature to that violence, even though Marius and Armand are not technically related. I mean, I guess they're vampirically related now because that's his maker. But, like, that sexual violence is also very racialized because he's a South Asian man and because he was a South Asian boy. Like, that would have been not even a question. When they would have seen, like, Marius and Armand in Venice together, they would have assumed that that's what Armand was for him.
I know I'm the one bringing up the book, but you said something a couple of days ago where
Marius... Oh god, that could be anything.
No, you said that, like, Marius was, like, upset when he would, like, talk about his father or something.
Oh my god, yeah, in the book. Okay,
I did say that. If we did talk about the book, I was going to make a little disclaimer. So we're briefly touching on the book because it's related. Yeah.
And this is one of the things that I think can't happen in the show. But in the book, Armand, when he becomes a vampire, Marius does take him back home. And Marius sees the way that Armand interacts with his father. And, like, Armand's dad loves him. Like, really loves him. And Marius gets really jealous. Like, he wants to be everything. He wants to override everything Armand's ever had.
Yeah.
And he wants to be the end all be all for him. So the fact that Armand has a father that's not him really, really irks him. And, like, later when they come back and Armand is very upset because, you know, he saw his family for the last time and Armand is in a depression for a bit. Marius is like, decides that he's done and whips him and is like, get up, you gotta do something else now.
That also reminds me of you saying that he wants to be, like, everything. Reminds me of this other, what Armand then feels like he should be for Louis, that he should be
everything for him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
These
absolutely.
Cycles keep cycling.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't know any other way. He's like, why shouldn't I be everything? Why do you need anyone else?
Yeah. And the reason why I'm bringing up, because like it's so important to Armand's story that he is a victim of child sexual abuse. The fact that child sexual abuse has an incestuous angle to it. It's so important because it really does color his psychology. The way he sees himself, the low self-esteem he has about himself is very, very, very like textbook survivors of that kind of violence. And also the fact that he has such complicated feelings about his abuser. It's really hard for him to say anything bad. Like, we see even when he's like, I didn't like being donated, but, you know, he was still not a bad guy.
Oh, gosh.
Like, he's really struggling with the feelings of, like, the love you have for a parent, but also not, like, being mistreated in the way that he was mistreated.
Because Mary's made it murky as fuck.
Yeah, it's very murky. And it's really fucked up. But yeah, so like we have him, and then we see him kind of like showing that he has no clear delineations between what is appropriate behavior for like parents and children, when he says to Louis, like tells Louis that Claudia didn't love him because she didn't love him the way that he loves Louis and the way that Lestat loved Louis. When those are different types of love. But he doesn't see that. Yeah, he doesn't. And the fact that he assumed, like, one of the first assumptions, and that he didn't know they were, like, moving as a family, but I think the fact that his first assumption when he's talking about, like, we're trying to figure out what the deal was with Louis and Claudia, he goes, were they lovers? And especially considering the fact that Claudia looks like a child. Yeah. That Armand's like,
that's normal. No, it's not. No, it's fucking not.
Yeah. It's very, 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 very troubling. Yeah. But I do think that's important also to get into the fact that he's experienced that type of violence, because I do think the way the fandom treats survivors of that kind of violence is very strange and very uncomfortable. Like the way
no one knows how to be normal.
Oh yeah, no one knows how to be normal about him. The fact that like they act like being a victim of sexual violence, the fact that he is subbing in his relationship with Louis is somehow self-harm as well. I've seen people say that Louis is self-harming by doming. I've also seen people say that Armand is self-harming by subbing, because of course you can't, if you're submitting, you're not in power, or if you're submitting, you're letting violence be done to you.
But that's not even how, first of all,
yes, it's a misunderstanding of BDSM.
That's not fucking ultimately how it works. You know, we talked about this before, but if you know anything about how BDSM is really supposed to work, the submissive is really the one who's in control, because they lay down their boundaries and what they want to happen to them. Yeah. Which I feel like is very interesting for Armand, because he's like, here's this fake control I'm going to pretend to give you, here's how we're going to allow it.
Yeah. And I think, like, I've seen people talk about, like, it's really fucked up that Armand is pretending to be a servant in Dubai. I think also people don't, and this is really messy, Armand eroticizes his own trauma. That just has to be accepted. That, like, why did Armand do that? Because he thinks it's hot. And sometimes that happens with victims of sexual assault. They'll, in very safe parameters, recreate parts of it, but like we said, in a safe environment where they know there's not actually going to be any harm. Yeah. So like Armand pretending, like wearing these low-cut shirts and basically doing like the little sexy maid outfit version of it to be like, oh no, my cleavage.
Oh my god.
My low V-neck as like fake Rashid. Like it's not the same as like him being forced to do it. He wants to do it. Yeah. And I think like you can have a whole conversation about it, but it's like to act like he's re-traumatizing himself when the parameters could not be more different, because we see how quickly he just drops it. Exactly. Once it's not a fun game anymore, he's like, I'm not doing this anymore. Yeah. Like we see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We also see in episode 6 of season 2, when Louis feels like the boundaries are getting too messy, Louis calls it. Yeah. So, like, Louis is very cognizant of Armand's boundaries.
Yeah, I think that's the thing for me. Like, a lot of people also think that this has to be getting back into like the weird infantilization of Armand. People act like this is a 24/7 thing, but like they all have their boundaries and they can like stop when they want. We don't know if they're 100% who's doming and subbing all the time with 24/7, like acting like Armand can't satisfy Louis is racist, by the way. Like we don't know what they're doing. We know what they're doing part of the time. We don't know what they're doing all the time. Like I'm assuming that Armand topped him in that one scene with the his dick was literally on fire. So like
with the scene,
fire ass dick. Like like clearly y'all are projecting some weird some weird stereotypical ideas. And people go too far either way. And so like I don't know, it's just it gets to a point, it gets weird that people don't know how to have a balanced view of this of their like sexual dynamic at all.
Yes, absolutely. And I think
oh my goodness.
But yeah, I think also on that same note, like to continue, God, what the fuck was I gonna say before that cat meowed? No, you're good. What'd you say? God, neither one.
I don't know how to have a balanced view of the sexual dynamic.
Oh yeah, I think also a lot of people equate sub and bottom and top and dom.
It's not even this.
You can be a sub top. You can be a dom bottom.
Yeah, and I think don't know. Like
we literally don't know. But also, I think it's like the fact that we hear Louis talk about the fact that he had this sexual exploration. Do you think he would then go into a very rigid configuration when he's like, I'm doing crazy shit?
Yeah.
I'm having threesomes frequently.
Yeah.
I'm able to have extraneous partners. Also, the fact that we see that, like, the fact in season 1, when Lestat's like, you can sleep with anyone as long as you come home to me. And then we actually see the promise of that, like, the actual execution of that for realsies with Louis and Armand. Yeah. Where the only reason Armand gets upset is because he didn't come home to him.
And because of the emotional side of it.
I think that's also part of it. He
was like, you're sharing your feelings?
Well, because if he had sex with Daniel, I think it would have been different. But the fact that he chose not to and was purely emotional and he'd stayed out all night and, like, he didn't come home to him, he's like, now this is the boundary we don't cross. You're being emotional.
Like, you have friends? I'm kidding. Well, kind of.
Yeah. He's like, you're being emotionally intimate with somebody, and that's not part of the deal.
I'm like, well, people can have friends.
No.
He's like, I'm supposed to be everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that people are very strange about, like, victims of sexual violence in BDSM relationships in general, but I think it's exacerbated by the fact that Armand is South Asian and Louis is black, and so they between the demasculinization of South Asian men and the hyper-masculinization of black men, people assume that Armand is little baby cowering in this dynamic, and Louis is, like, hurting him, whether physically or psychologically in it.
It's really weird that that's the assumption.
Yeah.
As well.
Especially because we see no evidence of that.
Exactly. And then people also, since I guess we're talking about the fandom now, because then we see people who are willing to engage with this kind of dynamic if it's with Daniel.
Yes.
With the white man. That's okay, though, apparently. It's okay, for him to be, super femme and subby for...
The fact that they literally, the proliferation of the Armand is Alice, like, headcanon, where it's like, you're literally saying Armand is a woman.
Yeah.
Or Armand overwrote himself to be a woman in Daniel's mind, so that is the feminization. And, like, it's very weird that you're doing that to the Asian man in his relationship with a white man.
I saw a mutual talk about, like, how folks will try to act like Louis being softened for his, like, white man is something that they try to act like that's like a good thing. And then it's the same thing though also with like Armand.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, they don't mind softening. Like, it takes a white person to soften these characters. Shout out to this mutual, but
yeah, but yes, absolutely. And the fact, like, despite the fact we've never seen them be anything but antagonistic toward each other, the assumption that Daniel is going to be more understanding of Armand's trauma than Louis.
That's crazy.
Despite the fact that we see Louis, like, boo-hooing when he's getting told his backstory in the museum, trying to hold it together. And when he even says, like, you split with the Coven, and he stops his own, like, downward spiral to be like, oh, are you okay? Like, Louis is very empathetic. The fact that he decides to commit to Armand when he learns everything that happened to him, and then is like, this is a person who is struggling with, who's struggling with being in control, so I'm going to take some of that control that he's told me he doesn't want. I'm going to take on the burden of that so that he can have an easier time.
That's another, okay, so that also, like, reminds me, because we're talking about, that's basically the bench scene. So, like, and also, I really find it interesting how people try to use Louis using his name Arun and tries to twist that into something negative when really it's him, like, reaching out to the young boy from before whiteness, basically,
and before the violence.
White violence.
Yeah.
Really. Before all the white violence, like, try to strip away his culture, he's reaching out to that person there and trying to ask him who he wants to be instead of what he's been molded by all these, like, white structures. And yet people try to twist it into something that's really, like, evil, when I'm like, no, that was probably very affirming.
Oh yeah. Like, that scene is so important, like you said, and it's also, like, these names have been put on Armand. Like, Amadeo was the title given to him by Marius, beloved of God, where Marius is God. And so it's like, your role is to love me and to be loved by me. And then he's named Armand by the Coven, which translates to soldier. So, like, your job is to carry out the will and the laws of the children of darkness. And so Louis is like, I'm reaching out beyond those titles. And
it's interesting that it's, a black man, another person of color, who is the one who does that.
I also think it's very affirming for Louis because, like, he has the legacy of slavery, right? Like, his family still lives on the plantation that, like, they were enslaved on, but now it was the sugar plantation, and then it was just their house. And then here's this, like, person who was enslaved, like, who has that experience and a very real very literal connection to it. And the fact that they've both had violence done to them at the hands of white people, and the fact that he's reaching out to him like, to try and figure out, who do you want to be, while he's also trying to figure out who he wants to be. And he's like, I'm also going to ask you that question and give you this benefit of not being subjected to these roles placed upon you by white men. And I'm meeting you where you are. And it's Armand who makes it a kink. It's Armand who says, yes, Metra. When all Louis was doing was trying to talk to not the Coven leader, not the man in the painting, but the person in front of him. Who are you? Who do you want to be without those titles? And Armand is like, that's so hot.
I want you.
I know. And also the fact that he was asked, like, what do you want to do? And Armand is basically like, I want to be with you. The fact that he then defines himself by Louis, because Armand has such a tenuous sense of self. I think he, like we talked about, he has no community. He sees himself as not really having a past. All that he can remember is, like, this violence that's been forced on him. So when he's asked, like, what do you want to do? He's never been in the position where he can answer that question genuinely. Whether it's the being disenfranchised as a slave or being brainwashed into being a cult. Like, he doesn't know how to be an independent person on his own. He hasn't been alone in 400 years. That's crazy.
Yeah.
He's never lived on his own. He's always lived with other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's living on his own for the first time post-divorce.
Yeah. Oh, God. That's going to be crazy.
Yeah. And he chose at first to be a deadbeat dad. He made that kid and ran.
Well, maybe the kid had bad vibes.
Yeah, maybe the kid... Hey, did everyone ever ask if the kid had bad vibes?
And that kid definitely had bad vibes.
That's horrible vibes.
And, like, speaking... Because we were talking about Daniel. Oh, yeah. But, like... So people think that, like, somehow Daniel's going to be the one who's going to empathize more. And yet, Daniel's the one who first sexualizes him in a very racialized way.
Yeah.
Daniel is the one who literally does not give a fuck about Claudia's abuse.
Oh, yeah.
And tries to just profit off of it. Like, we think that he's the one who's going to be out here being like,
yeah.
oh.
I don't even think that Daniel believes Armand's
Daniel,
story.
the one who, tells a woman to
put a paper bag on her head so he'll fuck her.
You think this is a man who's about to, like, sympathize?
Yeah.
And going to be a great source of emotional support for Armand? It's going to be crazy. It's not about to be soft and yeah, like we're not getting that. We're not getting a man who's about to be a place of like safety for
no, because like to be honest, he's not even that in the books.
Yeah.
That relationship ends poorly, and then they kind of end up together because Anne Rice was like, I'm Avengers towering my characters. Oh fuck, I forgot about Daniel. Because Daniel's with Marius in the books. Yeah, he hooks up with Marius and they're together for a while.
I did not know that piece.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, this just gets worse and worse.
Yeah.
What? First of all, Marius, what the fuck?
Mm-hmm.
Because why are you going after your fledgling?
His grandson.
Oh my god. I hate Marius. Die. And to the Marius fans, fuck yourself.
I think there was a poll going around that was so funny.
Gross.
Because I don't think anyone was getting the answers they wanted with this poll. But like, for me, Marius, I don't like him. I don't think he's interesting, and I don't like his story. But I think he's so important for the story. I like the effect he's had on other people because it makes a really fucked up, like, good gothic story that gets into these conversations about abuse of power.
Mm-hmm.
I think, sorry for my little tangent here real quick, but I think it's really important that, like, in the book, I don't know how many people talk about this a lot, but, like, in the book, the vampires they keep saying they don't have sexual desire, and they don't have sex the traditional way that we would have sex.
Mm-hmm.
But when he brings Armand into his house, he very blatantly sexually molests him in a human way.
Mm-hmm.
He bites him, but he also is sexual with him.
Mm-hmm.
Which, considering the fact that we've been told that vampires don't actually crave sexual desire that way, it's literally all about power, because ultimately that type of abuse is about power and having power over somebody else. Yeah. And it's so explicit, both in multiple ways, with Marius and Armand that is what that is, because they've really constantly hammered home every fucking second that these vampires have no use for sex. Mm-hmm. And then he does that to this boy.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's what it is. Mm-hmm. And it's really sickening. Yeah. But yeah, and then I think, like, in this same conversation about, like, sexual dynamics, and you brought it up a little bit earlier, the fact that, like, people talk about the Louis and whether they're, like, bed death.
Oh, yeah.
Or, like, in some way imply that Louis was craving Lestat the whole time because Armand was not a good partner for him, a sexually satisfying partner for him. That's also Orientalist.
Yeah.
The implication...
So y'all are being racist.
Yes. The fact that, like...
Because we had no proof of that. People were just making up shit. But you know what we did have proof of? The fact that Louis and Lestat weren't fucking for a long time.
Yeah. I had made a post on my Tumblr about this because I was annoyed that, like, people talk about Louis and Armand's relationship like it was, like, it had that death, or like it was sexually devoid. But, and then they treat it like in contrast to the Louis and Lestat relationship, when we know that for at least 16 or 17 years out of that 30-year relationship, they were not fucking.
Yeah, but we do know that Lou and were having freaky fucking sex because...
We saw that bedroom.
We saw the bedroom.
The fact that Mara LaPierre Sloop said that she built the bed with the intention that you could tie people up in it.
The fact that Louis was like, so which one are you doing tonight? You gonna, like...
Oh, you're gonna lick my boots? The fact that... Yeah. Yeah, the fact that, like, we know that they have a sexual relationship. Yeah, we know their bedroom was built for sex. We see them having sex in the show with the blood, like the vampire sexual scene. Yeah. Like, they are so... A lot of things were wrong in that relationship. The sex was not one of them. Yeah. But it is a very Orientalist view that, like, because Armand is Asian, I know people may not necessarily be cognizant of the fact that they're reinforcing this, but by insinuating that Armand is somehow too effeminate, too weak, sexually impotent, poorly endowed in this relationship, you are playing into Orientalist tropes about Asian men. And on top of it, when people read him being more sexually predacious, on the or sexually predatory, because people interpret...
I've seen a lot of people try to...
Oh my god.
Place him as a sexual predator, which we have not ever seen.
We haven't seen that.
We've seen all his other kind of abuse, but that's not something that we have seen him perpetrate, but we have seen someone else do that.
And it's Lestat. We literally have a scene of explicit marital rape in the show. But I don't see as many people talking about Lestat as a sexual predator as I do see people insinuate that Armand is...
Even though Claudia is very, like...
the fact that they literally put Bruce's face over Lestat's in that scene,
and she frequently
equates them. Even the fact that when they do their little ruse, she says Bruce was their maker, making that direct line. And so when they talk about Lestat, they're talking about Claudia's rapist. Yes, the whole time she's making very clear connections that what is happening. Louis, post episode 5, we cannot say that Louis can meaningfully consent, because even though we don't know that Lestat's gonna react with violence again, Lestat may have been completely genuine when he said never again. Yeah, but he doesn't know that,
and Louis just very clearly retreats into himself.
Oh yes,
and the way that
the fact that he literally was dissociating.
Before he's very like snapping, quick to like talk right back to Lestat, and now he's like literally walking on eggshells, trying to keep the peace. He's just trying to keep the peace. And he's like... Yeah,
but then we don't see anything like that with Armand, but people assume that, oh, well, because of how powerful he is, or because he was lying in the scene, he's raping him by omission, by lying, by deception. But Lestat was also more powerful than Louis, and Lestat was also keeping information from Louis.
That is something that has been very clear. We've seen that, but we haven't seen them ever try to suggest, because they're very clear about the kind of abuse that each of these men enact. Yeah, very clear. And that's never something that is suggested on Armand's end.
Yeah, and it is a common.
Let's be very clear about the kind of violence that they...
Yes.
Because otherwise you're leaning into racist stereotypes.
Yeah, because it's a very common racist stereotype that Indian men are rapists. There's been a huge influx of people saying they're not going to visit India because they're afraid they're going to get raped. There's been that person
white people saying that.
Yeah, white people saying that. And then there was this one post that had gone around a bit of this white girl being like, when you see that your Uber driver's an Indian man, and they did like a big frowny face, and they were just like, what the fuck's this supposed to mean? And they're like, well, I'm worried about getting sexually assaulted. And I'm like, you're just as likely to get assaulted by a white male Uber driver than an Indian man Uber driver. Like, what are you talking about? This insinuation that Indian men are rapists. And so the fact that people see scenes that are not overtly sexually predatory, but read sexually predatory intent on Armand's end, you're being racist and you're perpetuating the idea that Indian men are rapists.
Yeah.
Or somehow more culturally inclined toward rape than white men, which is racist.
Yeah.
Like, it's just racist. And, like, I do think it's exacerbated. I don't think it would be the same if he was a light-skinned Indian man. I think because he is a dark-skinned Indian man, they read more aggression or, like, aggressiveness in his behavior as well.
Yeah.
While having the paradox of feminizing him when they want him to seem weak, he's also more of a predator when they want him to seem... Yeah. It's the paradox of racism. You are what we need you to be to degrade you and to paint you as whatever type of villain I want you to be.
Yeah. It's weird.
Yes.
It's very weird. And then, of course, in that same line of other racial weird things is apparently y'all are still drawing him in weird harem girl bullshit. Is that... I don't frequent
I do
Tumblr or anything like that these days, Interview the Vampire Tumblr, but apparently y'all are still doing that.
It's on there. Honestly, it's on Twitter too.
Oh god. Well, I also don't visit y'all much anymore because a lot of y'all are weird and racist already. And I don't want to see it.
The amount of people who put him in what I can only describe as like their most vague recollections of what was worn in Disney's Aladdin.
Oh my god.
With a ton of gold jewelry.
Oh my god.
And being like, Armand! And it's like, ah. And the same goes for like when they try and draw like Arun. Putting him in just like, I would love to see him wearing more clothes than I've seen him in.
Oh no.
These like loincloths or like shirtless.
I actually hate y'all so fucking much.
Can you just like do a quick Google search of like what did they wear during the Delhi Sultanate? And then just do that. Because it is so fucked up, especially when you're drawing him as a child. So you're sexualizing a child in this way. It's really it's really uncomfortable. It's fucked up and it's really irritating because some of you were it's like this art is good if it wasn't so racist. Like, please look at a reference. Please, God, I'm begging on my hands and knees for you to look at a racist.
Someone should take away your drawing tools, as people say. Someone needs to take your fucking tablets, whatever you got,
until you earn the right to. You can't do it again.
You're not getting it back.
Yeah,
you fuck up, you're not getting it back. Sorry, my rule says you get one strike and you're out.
Yeah. Or the fact that, like, there was this one, like, redrawn meme going around, and everyone else was, like, drawing them in, like, the men that they were drawing them in, like, suits, but when they drew Armand, he was in lingerie. And they're like, why is he the only man that you drew in lingerie? And it's just, like, if you drew everyone in lingerie, that'd be fine.
Yeah.
Who cares? But the fact that it's, like, only Armand gets put in, like, these feminine outfits, it's just, like... While I'm not opposed to, like, fucking with gender,
same.
The way in which you do it with Armand, the way that everyone makes him smaller.
The reason why you choose, because he's not a small guy. In certain clothes, he looks. We talked about this earlier.
Oh yeah, we were literally looking at pictures. Because like
he looks a little bit more slender in certain clothes, but I think they do that on purpose. Because like the way that they do it, they'll like cover up how like big his arms are by
put a vest on him so you don't see his chest.
Putting on like slightly baggy sleeves so that you can't see that. And I think that's very purposeful. To kind of fit how he does try to make himself small sometimes. But he's not, because then we see him. He's not a small guy, okay?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, he's taller than everyone, isn't he?
He's
the
about
same height as Daniel.
He's the same height as Daniel, but he's taller than Lestat. He's taller than Louis.
And he's a muscular
guy. We saw him in the scene where he's just like,
we did see him.
It wasn't me.
I surely saw them. I mean,
Also, the scene in Paris where, like, he's putting on his shirt. I saw a post today where he's like, you don't really talk about your mother, flex pecs. Like, he is, like, he's very muscular. But yeah, so, like, that is very weird. And then going into the same thing, like, I guess to jump a little bit to racist ideas about Asian men specifically, if I see another person insinuate that Lestat could not have been into Armand in Paris, I'm gonna whack you. Because...
Lestat wish he were bad enough to have a baddie like that. But unfortunately,
Armand has low self-esteem.
Yeah. I need him to have higher self-esteem.
Yeah. But, like, the idea that, like, people think that he's lying and that it's absurd that Lestat would even ever be attracted to him, despite the fact that there is textual, because they keep pulling up the books. But there's so many books where, like, Lestat is, like, chin in his hands, being like, Armand is so beautiful. Armand is so alluring. When he brings up Armand, when Armand's not there, and he brings him into the conversation. Like, I think about all the time The Lion and Queen of the Damned, when he's describing Akasha's voice, and he goes, her voice was alluring, it really made you want to listen, like Armand's voice. Armand's not here. You brought Armand into this conversation when you're trying to describe how seductive someone's voice is, but apparently we're supposed to believe that Lestat never had feelings for Armand, and it's one-sided.
Yeah.
Like, it's very strange.
Yeah, and it's weird that people say that, like, Armand's, like, lying about it. I'm like...
Why would he be lying about it? Have you seen him? Why would it be so crazy that this guy who, like, grew up in the French countryside won't go into the city, see this beautiful man, and be like, I'm dropping my boyfriend for this guy?
I would drop that man for Armand? Listen. Nikki would be left on red.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, like, any of the weird, like, the fact that Armand portrays Lestat as being not as into him as he, because, like, that's what he's doing in his his, like, flashback. Like, it's not that he's doing fan fiction of, like, what if Lestat was into me? What he's playing up is, I cared more about Lestat than Lestat cared about me. Yeah. Because that's just how Armand sees himself. He's like, nobody really cares for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, but that's the lie that's being put there. Not that Lestat wasn't into him, but that Lestat wasn't as into him as he was in reality. Also, the fact that we kind of alluded to it earlier, but, like, Nikki straight up calls Armand a slur, and then people are saying that also the fact that people assume that Armand is lying about things that don't make sense.
Yeah.
Why are you assuming he's untrustworthy? Called a slur.
What?
What, to make us more amenable when we find out, like, when they hint that he had something to do with Nikki's death?
Oh, like, hello? Y'all don't even be making sense sometimes.
No.
Like, y'all really just be saying shit to say shit because you want to protect your little favorite white person, and I'm like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Why you gotta protect Nikki of all people? Like, you don't even...
Listen, Nikki doesn't even want to protect Nikki. Sorry.
Sorry. Hello? Nikki said, well. Damn.
Yeah.
Well.
But yeah, I think we talked about it, like, the softening of the partner. But, like, I also want to talk about a little bit. There's, like, the whole thing with, like, when we're talking about him, like, and his sexual relationships. Like, this is also a guy who hasn't had sexual autonomy for most of his life. Because there's also and the sexually, like, predatory thing. I remember someone saying something weird about him. I've seen this also other places about, like, him being weird with the cult, like the fact that he slept with the cult. But I also think it's like he doesn't have any boundaries. Yeah. Because he hasn't had sexual autonomy for most of his life. Like, of course, we know his situation with Marius, where he was seen as social currency by being handed out to whatever painter Marius wanted a painting of without having to pay money for it. And then we know in the Children of Darkness, because of also in the Lumont fight, when Louis says the Coven made you, or I guess, made him pretend that he didn't have a dick for 240 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like, forced celibacy is also, like, ripping away someone's bodily autonomy.
Oh, yeah.
So the fact that for... I need to do math. The fact that for, like, over 2.5 centuries, Armand has not had a say in what he was allowed to do with his body sexually means that his view of boundaries is fucked up. And so, like, what does a healthy sexual relationship look like to him in his mind? And I think it's not good.
Yeah.
But I also think, like, him having sex with a coven, while there is that crossing of boundaries because he is in a position of power, it's less like, I'm forcing you to do this as like a cult thing, and more like, I'm using my body as a reward for good behavior, which is not good either.
Which is not good either. But there is a difference. Yeah.
Yes.
But it's, still yikes no matter what. Oh, Armand.
We've had the conversation with therapy work on Armand, and the answer is, I don't know, man.
I don't know if it's gonna work.
No. But yeah.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, so,
God.
do we have anything else to say?
I don't know that anything else I have to say
that's not
fits here.
Okay. Cool. So,
I think ultimately too, like, to bring that back into the thing, like, all of this, all of his fucked up trauma, the fact that he then has, I don't know, I don't want to say he makes it everyone else's problem, but he certainly, as with every character, I guess, except for Louis, who got to have some self-actualization there at the end, he's making it everyone else's problem.
Yeah.
He has not, we're also at the beginning of his journey, I feel. So we're gonna see if he gets better or if he gets worse. God, I'm hoping he gets better.
Let's hope and pray.
I'll hope and pray.
Yeah, because,
Dear God.
Dear God. But yeah, so that's been, our conversation on Armand.
Yeah.
Like we said, I'm sure we'll revisit this once we get to know a little bit more of how the show is going to continue to dig into both his backstory and how he moves forward. But I feel like we really got to get into what we do know of his backstory and how that has affected everything around him right now, currently.
Yeah.
And how he's treating everyone currently. Or how he's being treated by, other white folk. As well, currently. And, doesn't feel the need to do anything about it, but
yeah, I think the fact that he takes it as a given.
Yeah,
it's really interesting that when he got power, he doesn't put his foot down about that kind of thing. It's like he accepts as just a reality of his existence.
Yeah,
which I think is also maybe why he is so indignant when Claudia has the audacity to be like, I shouldn't be treated like this. He's like, this is just how we're treated.
Yeah.
How dare you be upset about it?
Yeah, and I'm like...
Because if he takes it seriously that she's upset about it, that means that he has to be upset about it and he doesn't want to be. Because if he starts screaming, he's never going to stop. So he's like, I can't look down that hole. And so I'm going to punish you for bringing it to my attention.
It's a mess. It's a mess. And we're going to continue to talk about this, honestly, as we get into the trial.
Oh, yeah.
In our next episode. Like I said, we've taken these 3 characters and we're going to talk about how that all has led up to the trial. And also we're going to talk about the other characters involved in this as well not just the three of them, because there are other people involved in the trial.
Yep.
And a lot of them are also complicit
Mm-hmm.
in the violence that happens in the trial.
Yeah.
A lot of them.
Yep.
There's a lot of that to go around, a lot of blame to go around.
Yes.
But yeah, so we will get into that next time. But I hope that you guys have enjoyed our 4th installment of our, little straight from the coffin.
Yep, that's what we're called.
I remember a lot of things real well. But yeah, so that's our 4th installment of Straight from the Coffin. Yeah, hope that you've enjoyed it. You can, if you listen to this on YouTube, you should also go and, re-listen to it on our Spotify, because we are now on Spotify. If you're listening to it on Spotify,
follow our podcast on Spotify.
And now you can support us if you want to, because we
this is a labor of love.
Yeah.
But if you want to kick some dollars toward us, we would not say no.
Yeah, because now you can. Through our little Buzzsprout website.
Yes.
And then maybe, eventually we can do this even more often, eventually. Because, Jude edits on his dying laptop.
Mm-hmm.
And so it takes so long.
Yeah.
But if someday we can afford to upgrade that, then,
Yeah, my laptop starts wheezing if I am coughing up blood like a Victorian orphan with consumption. If I work too much on it before it just turns itself off.
Yes.
So it's if you're ever like, wow, these uploads are pretty infrequent. Yeah, I'm going through it. I'm doing my best.
We do think we found a good cadence. So we're gonna start being monthly, and we think we figured out how to make it work. And plus, after the trial one, we will probably cut our episodes down to an hour.
Yeah.
Or so. But we just had a lot to say.
We have a lot to say about these characters. Is there an echo in here? Yes.
Mind link. As people were talking, that was such a Lumon thing.
Oh yeah, them being in the mind link.
Yeah, people talk about that so much.
Yeah.
Well, those early days.
I have to believe that Louis is still getting messages and having to block him.
Yeah, he's like, oh god, leaving him on red.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out, how do I just I know how to block a number on my cell phone, but how do
I block a guy
in your mind?
Yeah, how do you get rid of him, because he's still accepting calls from Daniel, so
I don't know.
Yeah.
He's gonna have to figure it out.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's getting spammed.
Oh, Christ.
Louis,
I can't imagine what that...
Can you please send me your credit card number?
Yeah.
Is Sam no longer authorized?
Yeah. I'm trying to buy... What's it called? Robux?
Robux.
For Roblox?
Robux? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. Listen, I'm not young. I don't know what the kids are doing these days.
But yeah, sorry, we were supposed to sign off. And that's what happens.
He tried to open his Google Play account and it said the credentials didn't match up anymore. Sorry. Anyway, yes. So anyway, this has been Straight from the Coffin.
Yes.
We'll see you next time with our episode about the trial. Yes. And then after that, who knows what we'll talk about?
Who knows?
Maybe we'll talk about sinners.
Yes.
But yeah, so look forward to that. Follow us on all of our stuff. All of our socials are gonna be linked in the description or linked on the page. We're Two Goths in a Coffin basically everywhere. Yeah. And that's all. That's it. We don't have a coffin. No, we're not doing a song. No.